Guys, I am so excited to welcome to the show today Aaron and Jamie Ivey. Aaron is the pastor of worship and creativity at the Austin Stone, whoop whoop, where my just older than me brother, he's also a pastor, so they hang out. Hi, Scott. They are in Austin, Texas. He is the author of Steal Away Home. He's a songwriter, artist, elder, father, husband, and mentor, and has a deep love for his family, including his wife, Jamie. Which now let's talk about Jamie. She's been running Ivey Media for 7 years, where she produces 2 podcasts, including the super successful podcast called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey. Matt and I were recently on there. It's just great. And she's also has her own YouTube show. She's written 2 books, If You Only Knew and You Be You. Aaron and Jamie live in Austin and are parents to 4 amazing kids and have been married for 20 years, which I highlight that because that's relevant to today's conversation. Guys, welcome.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
So glad to have you. Oh, man. You guys listening, I know you're eager to jump and hear the content here, but you also know if you've been listening to our podcast for any length of time, we do a little warm-up question, a little question of the week from last week so that we can get to know you, our audience, better, as well as our guests. So, Aaron, we'll start with you. If you could be in the Guinness Book of World Records, what record-breaking feat would you attempt?
Oh my gosh, you didn't even prep me for this.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, can you think of something? I mean,
what record-breaking feat? I don't know if this is actually a record, but it'd be fun to have written the longest song in human history.
Ooh.
That has to be a record.
I'm sure.
Right?
Yeah. Don't do the fingernails one. That would be gross.
No,
So, song seems great.
That doesn't work out well.
Jamie, what about you?
Let's see. I would probably like to hold the record for, here's a fun one, for trying the most salsas in a day. And I don't mean salsa dancing. I mean like chips and salsa. Like how much chips and salsa can we eat in one day?
Ooh, yeah.
Like
just try not to grab those ghost pepper ones too much.
No, I'm done. None of that.
None of that nonsense. Steve O'Dell, what about you? Which listener response resonated with you and why?
Yeah, so I liked what David said, procrastinating.
Procrastinating.
Pretty simple.
I want to take that one too, David.
Samesies.
I mean, like, for me, it's a toss-up between that and Jamie's. Salsa, procrastinating, I'll take either, yeah.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I really liked what Dana said, John Wayne or Western trivia.
Wait, why?
Wow.
Well, you know me, I'm a big nerd, and so you just switch out Western with Star Wars, and I'm like, there it is, right there.
Star Wars in many ways is a Western.
I know, but
Oh,
very
man.
specific.
I appreciated this one from Jonathan. How long I could sleep. I mean, I think
like
that
I like
speaks
that one
to
too.
everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to try that.
Yeah, I would like to try that. But I think maybe if I tried a real thing, it's like longest deep chat. That's probably something
that would be
I
you,
would
Laurie.
do.
That would be torture for me.
I'm sure.
That would be torture.
I think most people on you. I don't know, Jamie. Maybe you'd like that, but I can handle
I would like it for a little while, but I don't know about that Guinness World Record, the longest.
Yeah, well, it's probably not actually a record. So let's move it right along to the heart of the matter, guys. The purpose of this podcast is to talk about how the gospel is good news for everyone, every day. And so we've been asking every guest a set of questions. And so we're going to continue the trend. Jamie and Aaron, if the gospel is, I am more loved than I imagine, and yet more sinful than I believe, shout out Tim Keller. When was the gospel first good news for you, and how is it still? Aaron, you want to hit it up?
Yeah, I met Jesus my freshman year of college. So I didn't know him at all. I was around like church people and stuff like that growing up, but I didn't actually meet him or fall in love with him until freshman year of college. And then when I did, I mean, that totally changed everything about my life. I've never gotten over it. The gospel is still something that deeply resonates with me. I'm still shocked that God likes me and loves me. I'm still shocked that he could use me for anything, I'm still just surprised by the whole thing. So once he got a hold of my heart, like it's just, it changed everything about my whole life.
Aaron, I love that. How do you need him right now?
How do I need him right now? We're parenting 4 teenagers, and so we need all the help we can get. So we need like wisdom. We need all the fruits of the spirit, patience. Oh my gosh, we need kindness. We need, just slowness to speak and slowness to anger. All of that stuff. Like I really need to understand the gospel right now in this season, maybe more than ever.
Love it. Jamie, I'd love to hear your answer to the gospel's good news first for you and then right now.
I too, like Aaron, grew up in a home that went to church all the time, but didn't really say, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I understand completely what you've done for me, and you offered me this gift until I was 21. And so I was in college as well. I went to a passion conference. I don't know how I ended up there because I was not someone who would. I was not someone who was interested in church things, but I ended up going to Passion, and I was sitting in the arena, and a woman was speaking, and it felt like she was speaking just to me, and the Holy Spirit just moved and did what he does and drew me towards him, and my life has never been the same since. The good news was then, and it still is today, and I would say today, even me really fully understanding that my identity is just found in him and him alone, even when I feel like I'm on top of the world and when I'm in the bottom of the pit, that my identity doesn't change. And I think that's what I need him for right now.
Preach.
So good. So guys, we want to jump in a little bit because you wrote this book, Compliment. And actually, when I say this book, I mean 2 books. It's the companion series.
It's awesome.
But why now? Why write a marriage book or marriage books at this point in time? Why now? And we'll go to Aaron.
I think Jamie and I both have noticed in most of the conversations that we have with people who are either thinking about marriage or just starting marriage or been married for a while. The conversations that we're having are, marriage is really hard. Is marriage worth it? Is marriage going to be something that is just destined to end up in, kind of a bland, apathetic kind of way? And
right.
We've all seen marriages that do, like, they start out super fun. They start out with 2 people in love, and then a couple years go by, life gets more complex, maybe some kids show up, and then the marriage seems to just kind of get stale and get boring, and Jamie and I fight really hard for that not to be our story, and we want to just be a help to people, because that's not the story that marriage is supposed to be. Marriage is supposed to be, the most life-giving, the most fun relationship that you have, and marriage is not the ultimate thing. Not everybody is going to experience marriage, and that's okay. Marriage is not like the thing that completes life, but if God does have marriage for you, we want to help people navigate through that and really figure out, like, God designed it to be something really extraordinary, not bland, not boring, not stale, but something really good and beautiful. And so that's why we wrote the book. We hope it's a help to people.
Aaron, you just touched on this, but Jamie, you even say in the book that marriage has gotten a bad rap. Can you unpack that a little bit further?
Yeah, I think if we can speak in like church world talk or like, culture even. I think that they're separate, but there's so many similarities that it's kind of hard sometimes to differentiate between what you hear in the church and what you hear in the world. And I think that's a little sad in itself. But like Aaron said, I mean, when we first got married, you hear all the things like, oh, it's just downhill for here, or, wait until you add some kids, and then all the things. And so I think with marriage getting a bad rap is a lot of people are willing to just forego the purpose of marriage, which isn't to make Aaron or I or anybody happy. Like that's, we believe that's what's so crazy about marriage, is that it is so exciting. It's so thrilling. It doesn't have to be boring, but also there's this deeper meaning to marriage that makes you stick it out even when it gets hard, because, marriage is about something more than just what can I get out of it or what can Aaron get out of it. And so I think a lot of people growing up in the church maybe are even confused about why should I get married? What makes marriage exciting? What does God even think about marriage? And I know I was that way when Aaron and I got married. I was 23, and I don't think I really ever even spent the time at that young age to think about, man, what's the purpose of marriage? Or why does it matter? Or, at that time I would have said, like, oh my gosh, Aaron's my soulmate. Like, we were just destined to be together forever, and he completes me. I would have said all of those things, and I don't believe either one of those things. I don't think that he's my soulmate. I don't think that he completes me. And so I think that we just want to be a part of the conversation about marriage because we believe it's so beautiful the way God designed it.
So Aaron, you're your book is the little subtitle is just the surprising beauty of choosing together over separate in marriage. And it's a wonderful title, but here we are coming out of COVID a little bit where there's been so much togetherness in marriage. Like how do you think this kind of quarantine, being stuck together, like isolated, has affected marriages and that togetherness that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2020 and now 2021 have been the hardest years of Jamie and I's marriage, and that's probably true for anybody that's been married. And I don't think COVID has brought anything new to marriages. I think it's just exposed maybe what's always been there, and what's always been there is like, you know, it's really easy when you're working and you are moving really quickly and you're just in a fast-paced life just to kind of like blaze through and not maybe address some of the things that are under the surface. But then when all of that slows down, you realize, oh, I'm actually not as gracious as I thought I was. I'm actually not as attentive to my spouse as I thought I was. You know, when life is slowed down and you're just kind of stuck in one spot, it exposes what's always kind of been there. And so Jamie and I have both had to kind of like see, okay, this is the real stuff that's in me. I am prone to overwork just to kind of like feel great about myself, to overachieve so that I can feel like I accomplished a bunch of stuff and feel like I'm awesome. But when all those things stop, then I realize, oh, I can do that to a fault and then miss out on paying really close attention to my spouse, like loving her and serving her. So I think that's what COVID's done. And I think it's a really good thing because it's forcing all of us who are married to really dig into the deeper parts of like, okay, I fell in love with you at the very beginning. I committed my life to you. Now that things are slowed down a little bit, now that all the layers are gone, I have to work really hard to make sure I'm still pursuing you, that I'm still dating you, that I'm still serving you and loving you in the way that God wants me to.
Okay, but let's talk real life. Jamie, how does that work in real life? Like, I literally just got off the phone with my sister, and she's like, so marriage and COVID, and also anytime, but COVID.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, there's the mystery's kind of gone, because it's like, well, what'd you do? You're like, what did you do today? And you're like, I know what you did. Your life was really boring today because I saw you 3 times or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, you guys are talking about it doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be blah. So how did you guys go from, wow, I maybe don't actually like you. I choose love because I have Jesus in me, but I don't like you right now. How do you guys go from just awareness of that to leaning toward?
Yeah, I mean, like Aaron said, 2020, y'all, it kicked our butts with marriage. And the crazy thing about that, just a little behind the scenes for listeners, is we were about to turn in this manuscript when COVID hit. And so here we are in our hardest year of marriage ever, editing a marriage book. I mean, guys, listen, it's just like the craziness about it. But I think, you know, the thing that happened in COVID was, like Aaron said, the selfishness, anything that was there, it just kind of rose to the surface. It's kind of like you say, like, oh, I didn't know I had anger issues till I had kids. Well, you've always had anger issues. It's just your kids brought them to the surface. And so that's what COVID did for us. And so working through that, it was messy. It was ugly. But here we are, you know, 12 months on the other side of it, 13 months on the other side of it, going, okay, so we walked through one of the hardest seasons, and we had to choose every day. I'm going to say I'm sorry, and I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to try to do better next time. I'm going to do this. And so I have never had to say I'm sorry so many times as I did last year. I have never had to like come before Aaron in humility so many times as I did last year. I probably had never been as angry at Aaron as I had as last year. And so all of those things combined, but yet it's like the gospel we talked about in, you know, the beginning of the show. It's like it's continually working in us. And so just because we had this, you know, terrible 3 days where we're just mad at each other and fighting, the gospel is still working, and we're still striving to love each other and have that thriving, exciting, fun, not boring marriage. And so it just took so much more work. That's why I think on the other side of that year, we can look people in the eyes and say, we know this is hard. We know it's really hard. And we know you're going to have hard days and hard weeks and hard months and sometimes even hard years. But we know that God is also faithful to us if we continue to do the work to put it in. So day to day, man, there are a lot of days I didn't choose the right thing. And I was holding on to things, you know, counting wrongs. I had a scorecard in my head that forever had that ticking little my score, your score. And so there are days that I can say, man, I didn't choose the right thing. And then there are days that I was like, man, God, you have to do this in me because I can't do this on my own. And that's what being a Christian is, is saying, God, I can't do this. You have to do this for me. So I think it's just every day thinking, I want to look more like Jesus. And so how am I going to do that today?
Oneness takes work.
Always.
And so I love hearing that in your marriage. And for those of you who are single, like if you're like checking out, your eyes are rolling or whatever at all of like, oh, this is only marriage. Oneness takes work in the church too. I'm just always, even in my friendships, I'm always like, okay, well, if I'm willing to work at it with Matt, I need to be able to work at it in this friendship, to not let them just drift, to not let it just, these little things get in the way. But oneness takes work. And this is such a beautiful, practical care for that.
Yeah. So Jamie, earlier you said that when you first got married, you assumed that Aaron was your soulmate and all that good flowery stuff. But Aaron, from your perspective, go back to the beginning. When you guys got married, what was the reason that you got married?
Well, I honestly didn't think that I would probably ever find somebody that would like me and love me. I grew up not understanding what love was really. I didn't know how to love people. I didn't know how to receive love. I grew up like like extreme introvert, like super lonely. Like that was kind of like the way I grew up. And so I don't think I entered into it. Like some people are like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get married. Who's my soulmate going to be? Dating a lot of people. That wasn't my story at all. I was really surprised that Jamie liked me, and I still kind of am. So I think as we started to date, we started to build our dating relationship on friendship. And that's what we think is so critical for people who are dating, is just to build the entire thing on being deep rooted friends with each other, because friendship is what's going to last when you are married and you go through really, really hard things. If it's just built on infatuation, or it's built on sex, or it's just built on attraction, those things are all going to change throughout the years. They're going to change when you get married. They're going to change 10 years into marriage, 50 years into marriage. But if you can build it on friendship, that's a thing that's going to last throughout the whole deal. And so we always tell couples when they're dating, hey, take out all the things from the relationship that would distract from you guys just being really, really good friends. Like focus in on that. And then Jamie and I, after being really good friends, and then dating as friends, it just made all the sense in the world to look at Jamie, who was next to me doing the same kind of things with the same mission in life, the same passions, wanting to do the same things in the world. And for us to go, oh, wow, this is God actually like uniting two whole souls, right? Two people who are totally like legit on their own. I don't need Jamie. Jamie doesn't need me to complete her. That's when a marriage can form, and it can actually be healthy because it's two people who are both rooted in Jesus, right? Like their own people, their own person, and then they're just doing the same kind of mission together. That's how we ended up getting married, and that friendship turned into like deep, abiding love, and that's what's kept us through the whole thing.
I love that. I'd love for this next one for you both to answer. Jamie, I'll start with you. So Matt could, I'm sure, attest to this just as a therapist, but me just talking to my friends or whatever, often there can be a spouse who doesn't want to work on the marriage. Like you guys are both saying, we saw this thing, you're both committed to Jesus, and so Jesus makes you work on stuff. So Jamie, what would you say to someone who's like, okay, well, good for you. You're married to Aaron Ivey. He wants to work on his stuff. Like, what would you say to that friend who's like, well, my spouse doesn't want to work?
Yeah, first I would say I'm sorry because that has to be an extremely difficult situation that I don't personally understand right now in our current marriage. And because Aaron and I both were like, we want to work on this forever. But I would first say I'm sorry. And then I would say, honestly, at the end of the day, you can't make your spouse do anything. Yeah. And I think anyone that's been married for, longer than a minute understands that, is that I actually can't make Aaron do anything. I can't make him a better dad. I can't make him a better lover. I can't make him a better husband. Like, I don't have the ability to do that. And I think that where it gets so difficult, I'll speak from a woman's perspective, is a lot of time women think, I'll be the one to change him. I'll change him. I'll show him the way. I'll do all the things, and he's going to be awesome because I'm going to do it. And that's too much power to give yourself because you can't actually do it. It's also too much pressure because you can't actually do it either. And so my advice would be, this sounds so churchy, and I don't want it to feel churchy, especially if you're like, okay, whatever, would really be to pray. I mean, really, really, really to pray, and not pray like, oh, that they come around or whatever, but pray that they fall in love with Jesus. Because I honestly think that like falling in love with Jesus, a lot of the pieces that we're wanting to get fixed, they fall into place that way. And so that would be my number one prayer, is pray that they fall in love with Jesus and that Jesus is the one that can transform them and you can't.
So good. And guys, of course, we're not talking about situations of abuse or whatever. That's not, just a prayer or quiet. That's a justice issue. So just please get yourself safe.
Right.
But we're talking about in a non-abusive situation. Exactly. You just got to pray. I remember doing that with Matt when he drove me insane. All I would silently pray is make him like Jesus.
Make him like Jesus.
And I'm sure he had to do that for me when it was my
Right.
turn. Aaron, same question for you. What do you say to guys if their wife's like doesn't want to work?
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who's in that exact spot right now. And I know from just walking alongside him how difficult that is, and he happens to be like a Jesus follower. And so there's an aspect of that that's definitely helpful, right, to get through that. But I think what I've learned from him is there's so much power in serving your spouse that is such a compelling sort of thing. I think it's easy for guys to want to just like be on the defensive, or like be kind of like attacking, like, you need to do this, why don't you do this, I'm so frustrated with you and doing this all the time, right? But for a guy to like actually take the maybe the more uncomfortable seat and like actually serve, like to literally choose a posture of, I'm going to serve my spouse, I'm going to look for opportunities to lay down my life so that she can see what a heart of a servant actually looks like. When you see a spouse who's like just willingly like doing whatever it takes to lay down their preferences and their desires and their life for you, that is so compelling, right? And I've seen her heart change so much, not by him like pointing out all of her errors, but by just like being patient, being gentle, being kind, being servant-hearted. That right there is like so underrated. But the people in my life, right, that have changed me and have let me like kind of come out of like a hardness of heart or places where I've just been stubborn, weren't the people that came at me. They were the people that just were gentle and patient. And I think sometimes too, like the process of God changing a person's heart is really slow. Like we want it overnight. We want our marriages to be fixed in a year, but God doesn't move in that timing. It's just slow sometimes. And just trusting him with that and sticking with it, I think is so critical.
So you guys say that, okay, this last year was rough for you guys, and it was a hard thing, but not all of the issues that came up last year started last year. I mean, some of this would have been baggage that you guys maybe brought into the marriage that just kind of lay dormant for a while, and so I guess, Jamie, I'll ask you this question specifically, but how much of that baggage that you guys dealt with last year was something that you feel was really important for you and Aaron to work through together, rather than maybe both of you even separately going to someone like me as a therapist to work on your own like solo baggage? How much of that should be like resting on the marriage?
You're just telling me that answer, Matt. You're my therapist. I will say this. I personally spent, and Aaron too, but I'll let him speak for himself, spent lots of time last year with a counselor. And so I look back and I think, man, I personally had to take so much ownership over some issues. And of course, we're married. And so those things overflow into our marriage, which is just how life works, But I look back and think, man, I had to own so much of my own stuff before I think it could even start to heal and work out in our marriage, because it wasn't like we had to come together and think, okay, here are the things we need to work on as a couple. It was kind of like, here's what I need to work on so that I can complement you better, to use our title of our book. So I can be a better wife, so I can be a better friend. Because right now I'm failing as a friend. I'm not being that good friend to you. So I had to work through things. And, Aaron mentioned, like he's like an achiever. And so he wanted to work. And I kind of can shut down sometimes in difficult situations. And so COVID hits and I'm shutting down and he's like working. And so we both I had to own up to, I can't just shut down. Like, I can't just, freeze. I can't just do these things. So I think individually, I would say we had to work on things the most.
Okay. So it started individual, at least in therapy, but then it affected the marriage. Aaron, is that the same kind of response from you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, talking about it, COVID exposing things that have always been there. Like for me, a year ago, so this is like in the middle of COVID, I got diagnosed with clinical depression, and it's something that I knew I had struggled with for so long, but because I was an overachiever and still am, I could just like cope with that by like pushing through and trying to be impressive and overworking. And so I've always known that there's been just like this dull sense of sadness and loneliness that I've always dealt with. But that was exposed through COVID, and it came out even more to where it was something that was like I couldn't deal with it on my own. All the coping mechanisms that I had for so long, for 40 years, just they stopped working like overnight. And so that played into a lot of the conflict that Jamie and I had. I was like depressed, and I was hiding it from other people. I was hiding it from Jamie. And so then when you're overworking and then you're also working really hard to hide something, then it's exhausting. And so we can look back and go, man, a lot of our conflict came from something that I was dealing with that first I had to kind of like wrestle to the ground, and I had to get help through therapy and through medication before we could ever work on how that played out into our marriage. So yeah, I think it totally starts with kind of the person dealing with who they are and what they are kind of going through, because that always plays out into the marriage eventually.
Yeah. Do you mind? Thank you so much for like your real vulnerability. Do you mind if I ask you a question that I ask a lot of my clients? Can I put on the therapist hat for a second?
About to get real.
Do I have to pay for this?
No. Do you mind?
No.
Okay,
Not
perfect.
paying, but asking.
Perfect. Yeah. Do you mind paying? No. So oftentimes, and you brought up with your depression, like you didn't want to share with anyone. You wanted to hide it. And that led you to a space of isolation. Oftentimes in places of conflict or avoidance, we're operating under this like unconfronted assumption about ourselves or about someone else, or about our spouse maybe. What was that assumption about Jamie, maybe that you were having to confront before you felt comfortable opening up with your depression?
I think the assumption was that Jamie needed me to have all of my junk together. I think that was the driving assumption, because that's what I assume about everyone in my life, is that they need me to be somebody, that they love me because of what I do for them and not just for who I am. So that's something that I've had to really like untangle in my relationship with Jamie, and honestly in my relationship with every person, that I can actually be loved. I can be loved and I can be valuable to someone just for who I am, not for what I do for them.
Now I'm crying.
I know. It's so good. Precious Jamie, can I ask you, so in our marriage, I mean, it's all over our book, but we've had some issues, a couple. But walking with a spouse who's wrestling with mental health, what was that like for you, if I may ask?
Yeah, I mean, even hearing Aaron talk about it now, it gets me teary, because it was that would be difficult in like a quote unquote normal time. And we keep talking, we're going to talk about 2020 as being the weirdest, most difficult year until all of us die.
Right.
And then it's compacted on top of that. And then it's also compacted on top of like, I didn't know the things that Aaron was feeling. And so then I feel like, I've been married to you for 18, 19 years. I've never heard you say these things. And he's like, I know, I would never want to say them to anyone. And so it felt really hard for me, because then I had to deal with, well, I'm not enough for Aaron because Aaron didn't trust me with this. And so he feels like he's not enough for me. I feel like I'm not enough for him. And so it was hard. And I think it's still, every time I hear him talk about it, it's still really hard. You know, he was on actually my podcast recently and gave just one of the best illustrations that I've ever heard. And I've had so many people resonate to it. And as he was sitting here and I was interviewing him and he was saying that thing to me, I felt so sad, because I don't understand it either. Yeah. You know, I don't understand what that feels like. And as his wife and, you know, you don't have to be best friends in a marriage, but I feel like Aaron and I are really great best friends. I felt sad, you know, and I still feel sad. But but it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with Aaron, you know? And so it's not like anything I need to fix. I just think it was just it was hard understanding that he was going through something and I didn't know about it.
Can you share the illustration, Aaron?
Yeah, she was asking about depression and kind of what it feels like, and I've had people ask that a lot, and out of like genuine concern, like, dude, tell me, what does it feel like? Is it just that you're sad all the time? And it's not that at all. It's like the illustration I gave was, it's like you live in this perfect house, this beautiful house, this mansion. Maybe it's somewhere like in England, you know, with like a immaculate lawn on tons of acreage, and it's a massive, beautiful house. And inside that house is everything that could ever make you happy. It's got everything you need. You've got friends that are coming by. Everything that you could ever want or afford, right, is right there in that house. And it's beautiful. It's awesome. It's stunning. But underneath that house is a basement. And that basement is everything that is scary, everything that is wounding, everything that is lonely and sad. And no matter how hard you try, to not go into that basement, depression feels like you're always just like pulled into that basement. And you're in that basement, you're looking around, you're like, well, I have no reason to be sad. Look what's up there. All the people that I love, everything that I find so comfortable and so beautiful is right up there. Anybody walking by would look by and go, man, Aaron's life is awesome. Look at his house. Look at all the stuff that he has. But when you go through depression, you're in that basement, and no matter how hard you try, you can't get out. And that's the way it feels when you are struggling through depression. That's the way it feels for me. And where things like therapy and medication have come in to help has been, it's kept me from going into that basement. I can still kind of like open the door and peek in there. I know what's in there. I'm still tempted to kind of like walk down the stairs and hang out in there. So the basement is still there, but I've learned to not like engage all the way fully into like living in that basement. And I hate that it's still there. I wish I could just demolish it and get rid of it, or build a wall in front of the door so I don't have to see the door. But those things have helped me not kind of like live in that basement. That's the illustration that I told. That seems to make the most sense to me.
And I think that was really hard for me to hear. But, you know, in the context of us talking about marriage, I would start to believe that I should be enough to keep Aaron out of the basement. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm your wife. You love me. Why would you want to go to the basement when I'm here in the living room? And it's just really it's been a learning thing for me too, to realize that like, that's too much pressure for me as well, you know, like, and that's not something that I can actually do, for Aaron. Like, that's between him and God. And we're so grateful for therapy and medicine. Like he said, those graces that God gives us are amazing. But I would say that's been difficult, and that's not an uncommon story for couples. Like, I mean, that's what I think we've learned so much. And, you know, being married for almost 20 years is that life is just stinking hard. Yeah. I mean, you know, like, you just throw all kinds of things into the mix: mental health, kids with special needs, trauma, work, you know, all the things. And then you look around and be like, okay, so how are we going to make it through this? And I think that's one of our things that I've even learned through this last year, is that making it through what Aaron's been walking through, it has to have a stronger foundation other than just like, oh, we're sexually attracted to each other, right, and we like to eat Mexican food together. Like, that is never going to stand up for that basement illustration. And I think that is what we want marriages to know, is that that foundation has to be bigger than what you think can sustain you, because it can't.
I feel like someone needs to hear this. Aaron, do you need Jamie to be strong enough to block the basement off?
No, and she can't be. And so if I put that on her, I'm going to always put too much pressure on her, and I will always be let down. Always. And
Jamie, do you need Aaron to be strong enough to keep it all together?
No, because I mean, I can't, he can't do that. I can't make him do that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
And you don't actually need that. You need Jesus. And in this death
right.
to self and union, you guys are showing us Jesus, and you're loving each other through this. Okay, let's take a breather, and I want to look at our single friends who are listening in, and they're like, oh boy, this seems hard. And, I'm guessing during COVID, there's been times where they've looked at us as married people and they're like, well, at least you're married. And we look at them and we're like, well, at least you're alone.
Yeah.
But can you just invite some single friends who are like, oh, maybe my married friends need a little help? Like, how can your single friends, or how can our single friends help some of us who are still riding the Hot Mess Express?
Mm. Well, Jamie and I have single people in our life like crazy, and we love it. I mean, just last night there were two single guys hanging out with us, having dinner and playing video games with our kids until midnight. Right? That's a very normalized thing for our life, and we absolutely love it. We feel like in some ways, I think they would say that we are a blessing to them, but honestly, like they're such a blessing to us.
Yep.
Because they give us a different perspective on life. They teach us things that we would not know on our own, just living as two married people with a bunch of kids. It's such like a mutually beneficial relationship and friendship. And so I think single people need to hear and understand, like, you have value and purpose, and there's something that God has for you to do right now in your singleness. Because if you can wrap your mind around that, then marriage won't be this thing that you finally feel like you can get to and then do something awesome with your life. Like, so many of our single friends are doing radical, incredible things for God right now. And they are not looking around for hoping, like, who can they find to marry? They're not. They're just so focused on, like, I'm going to spend my life and my singleness, like, doing stuff. I'm going to make a difference in the world. I'm going to care about justice. I'm going to care about racism in America. I'm going to serve my tail off in Austin, Texas. And I want single people to be like really encouraged and challenged to do that with their singleness, right?
Yes.
With no expectation to get married. And if you do, like, there are some people that are like, I just want to get married one day. That's great. But to be able to embrace your singleness and spend it really, really well.
So good.
So if there's someone out there who's listening to this and they just have not much hope in their marriage, or maybe they're looking at marriage and the whole institute of it without any hope, is there anything, we'll start with you, Jamie, and then move to Aaron. Is there anything you would say to them today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, that Jesus is our hope. He's our living hope. He's the only way that any of us have hope in anything, whether that be our marriages, our parenting, our mentoring, our friendships. He is our only hope because of what he did for us on the cross. That is what brings us hope. And so when you're looking at marriage, it can feel very, very, very like overwhelming. And you guys know this because I couldn't go throughout this episode with telling you how much I love y'all's book again. So y'all have written about it. And the whole time in your book, it was like that Jesus is our hope, that we cannot put our hope in another person. And so if your marriage is struggling, I would ask you, where is your hope? Is your hope in your marriage? That's like a hard thing because you want your marriage to survive and thrive. But is your hope in your marriage, or is your hope in your spouse being better? And if it's either one of those things, they can't do it. They can't survive. It can't be okay. But when our hope is in Jesus, then even if your marriage doesn't survive, even if your spouse never follows Jesus, even if your spouse still chooses the selfish ways that are hurting your marriage, even if all those things happen, like, nothing changes in your life because you have a hope in something that's deeper than your marriage. So
Get it.
I would just encourage you to ask, where is your hope? And it should be in Jesus.
Get it, Jamie.
Yeah, and I would add, I feel like in our culture, we definitely give up on things really quickly. We tend to, like, bail on a job when we have a supervisor that's tough to get along with. We tend to bail on school whenever it gets really tough. Like, that's just an easy thing for us in our current culture to just, like, give up on something or somebody. And being a pastor for like 20 years now, like, I have seen some really, like, hard marriages that a lot of people would say were hopeless to ever find, like, repair. I've seen them turn into something really beautiful, and I've seen it so much that I'm confident in saying, like, man, God can fix some crazy things. And if you feel like your marriage is super hopeless right now, don't give up on it. Don't give up on it. Like, just keep pressing forward, keep doing what Jamie was talking about. Pray for your spouse, like, ask God to change, like, the spots in your heart that need to be changed too, because it's always two people, right? Everybody's got their own thing that they need like help and change in, but don't give up. Like keep pressing forward, keep asking God to change, keep learning about yourself, about marriage, keep learning how to do it better. I just really want to encourage people, like God can restore a lot of broken things, and he's really good at doing that.
Okay, I love it, but I feel like there needs to be one more thing. Aaron, can you please speak to someone who is struggling with their mental health, either in their marriage or in their singleness, and they're just so over it? It's been over a year maybe, and that it maybe began or reignited in COVID, and they're just over it. Will you please just speak to that person?
Yeah, I would say two things come to mind. I've felt like I was over it too, and just like so tired of it, and felt like such shame about it. I think there's a stigma with like mental health where it's like, I heard people say this, like, oh, I'm sure you're depressed. Everybody's depressed. It's COVID, you know, or why would you be sad about anything? Why would you have that mental health? Look how awesome your life is, right? I heard that even before the diagnosis. And so what that does is it just starts planting seeds of like, okay, stuff that, keep that. There's shame involved with that. So I would say two things. One, there is no shame with mental health, none, zero. And if somebody ever makes you feel shameful or tells you that there's shame involved, you need to run from that person, because they're not a safe person and they're not a real friend. And so don't fall into the trap of feeling shame. Like get help through therapy, get help through medication if you need it. Like just get help, because there's so many people that really understand mental health and want to help you. And then the second thing I would say is surround yourself with a few people that really know you and really love you, that you can be your whole self with, that you can be completely honest on the days where you're like, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I'm super sad today. You have to have people in your life to get through mental health. You just have to. So those are my two things that I would encourage you to do right now, and to keep pushing forward, because God has he has such love for you, and he sees you. He knows you perfectly. He's not surprised by mental health, and he's not like worried and anxious, like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? But he perfectly formed you, and he knows you so much better than anybody else could. And with that knowing, man, is an immense amount of love. So I hope that's encouraging for whoever's listening.
Please, get it, Jamie.
I would like to add to like something that I've had to embrace and understand and learn is that when Aaron says to me, I'm just sad today, my initial thought is, I don't, why? What do you mean? Like, what? But I've had to understand that, like, I don't have to understand that, but I have to just go, I'm sorry and it's okay. Like, I'm sorry and it's okay. Like, you can be sad. And know, like, it's not me. That's so selfish of me to make it about me, you know? And that's my tendency to be like, well, what did I do? Is it me? Like, I must have done something. It's so selfish, like to think, oh, his life revolves around me, but he's just sad. And so I would just encourage, if you're that person, that safe person for someone, to be willing to go, I'm sorry and it's okay.
It's so good. Oh man, Aaron, Jamie, thank you for blessing us with this incredible book. Guys, go get Compliment wherever you can get books, which is what? Amazon. But also Barnes & Noble, etc. Yes. But
anywhere.
But thank you so much for sharing this beautiful story here, and just opening up your heart and lives with us today on the podcast.
Absolutely. We love you.
Thanks, guys.
You too. All right, guys, we'll finish it up on this end. Thank you so much for your time. We'll let you know when it posts.
Okay.
Love to. We'll love to share it. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank
Thanks,
Bye.
Aaron. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.